Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
I kind of want to turn attention next to Brexit and to Jeremy Corbyn. There's a couple of reasons. Obviously, there's a couple of reasons. The first is the discovery that we run the risk now of being turned into a Singapore-style tax haven where workers' rights are sacrificed upon the altar of attracting business. Again, I would cautiously suggest that nobody actually voted for that. But we are where we are. People talking about a new world order. And I think they might be right, except it's not a new world order, is it? It's the old world order that's coming back. It is increasingly clear to me, and I don't know whether it's happened by accident or by design. Everyone in the Western world is sort of reviewing what they thought were inalienable truths at the moment, and actually also having mysteries solved. I don't know about you, but I grew up not really being able to contemplate or even begin to comprehend how a country like Germany could end up fostering a Holocaust. I mean, how people could actually vote for a man like Hitler or go along with the demonization of minorities or the validation of sexual violence in the way that we're seeing now in a very new light. But it's a very old problem. It's a new world order. It's not a new world order. It's a return to the pre-Second World War world order of feudalism, forelock tugging, and knowing your place. How do I know this? Easy. I'm a wealthy middle-class white man who went to public school. I've lived in this world all my life, or at least since I got to public school. My family background doesn't fit into this category at all. And there is a feeling particularly among the non-wealthy middle-class white men, that they've been sort of pushed off the top of the pile recently. And it may not be their own fault that they've not done as well in life as they thought they would do, but they've decided over the last 20 years in particular, since the phrase political correctness appeared in popular usage, they've decided that the reason why they're not living in castles or they're not ruling even their own roost anymore because of flipping feminism, even the flipping wife now is allowed to have autonomy and independence, and if you know, they're even allowed to spend their own money now. They don't just have to rely on what I give them out of their housekeeping. These men are on the march, but it's not new. It's ancient. The Second World War, the more I read about it, the more I learn about it, and the more I look at the foundation of the NHS, the more I realise that the Second World War made the old order untenable. You could not bring back these heroes from the battlefields of, well, most of the world, actually, in the case of the British Army, and treat them like you treated them before they went away. You just couldn't. You couldn't bring them back and tell them that if they got sick, tough. If their children were born, malnourishment was probably on the cards. They couldn't even have a lavatory in their own house. Slums and appalling conditions right across the country while people lived in mansions. After the Second World War, we're talking, and still had an astonishing imbalance of wealth. And then you had the middle class, which started growing and was a good thing to start with because it was evidence of social mobility. It was a way to move from the bottom to the top. You were never going to get to the very top unless you were a complete freak. I mean that in a good way, unless you invented something incredible or you found a way of minting money. But the middle class then started growing, and it was, if you like, a kind of class that celebrated aspiration and self-improvement. But the Second World War is the reason why we have a welfare state and a health service. Because the society, the notion of a country, couldn't turn its back upon our returning heroes or upon the orphans and the widows that were caused by the Second World War. And then, it seems to me, by about the early 1980s, the end of the 1970s, everybody had forgotten this. Everybody had started sort of looking around and wondering why they weren't ruling the roost anymore. And they get very cross about it. It's why people like Alf Garnett were popular in that era on the telly. It's why, even in a strange sense, Tony Hancock's sort of frustrated Middle Englander was so close to the bone for so many people, and therefore so funny. And this notion that, you know, other people are getting too much and I'm not getting enough began to take hold. Today, that feeling reaches its apotheosis. People who feel that others are getting too much and they're somehow not getting enough have voted into the White House a man who won't even publish his tax returns, and who is, well, he's a man who calls home a golden tower with his own name emblazoned on everything. So you end up voting in someone like that because you don't feel you're getting enough. So what is the trick everybody missed, so-called liberals missed? It's easy. I mean, it's the easiest trick, the oldest trick in the book. You tell them that you care. You tell all the people who don't think that they're getting enough and that other people are getting too much. You can't do it without the other people getting too much. It simply won't work unless you can portray other people, usually falsely, as getting too much. And that, obviously, in Britain is uncontrolled mass immigration, and in America it's Muslims and Mexicans. Other people are getting too much, and that's why you're not getting enough. Now, oddly, that's true. The reason why you're not getting enough is because other people are getting too much. But it's people like Donald Trump that are getting too much. It's not people like his pool cleaner who happens to hail from, I don't know, south of the border. And now we've started undoing it again. I think Brexit is a part of this. We've started undoing it again because we're still chomping at the bit for Brexit as a country, even though we've now had it proved to us beyond any reasonable doubt that we were lied to on an industrial scale. And the people who did the lying on an industrial scale, they're doubling down on their lies now. They're saying, all along, we told you we were going to leave the single market. They categorically didn't. And people on the other side said that because they knew it was true. You are not going to be able to stay in the European single market if you vote to leave the European. They kept saying it. And yet on the other side, oh, don't be silly, we'll be fine. They need us more than we need them. And then you start dismantling what the European Union represents, another creation born from the bloodshed of the Second World War. So you've got the welfare state, you've got the National Health Service, and you've got the European Union, all designed deliberately, by British politicians in the main, but all designed deliberately to stop injustice, to stop inequality, and ideally to stop war. Welfare state, health service, European Union. Right. European Union, we're out. Health service, falling apart. Welfare state, public enemy number one, according to the right-wing media. It's so simple when you have it explained to you. I'm not suggesting it's simple now that I've explained it to you. I'm suggesting it's simple when I had it explained to me. To see it as a return... I mean, why do you think Farage wanders around dressed like a gamekeeper? The fella's in New York at the moment, and he's dressed like something out of Lady Chatterley's Lover. It's the fetishization of the aristocracy. These people can't wait to get back to the days when, you'd owe the lord of the manor everything. Your home, your job, your future, your livelihood, your health. Oh, well, we'll pay for Mellors to go and have an operation. He'll be all right. Because this is what's going to happen 20, 30 years down the line. You want healthcare? Look at what America's just done. 20 million people in America have just voted themselves out of health insurance. And you think I exaggerate sometimes. I know you do when I talk about the lies and the liars. If you counted the number of people who didn't know that the Affordable Care Act was Obamacare, you could change the result of the American election. If you follow the American media as closely as I do, and you probably should at the moment, you have people who voted against Obamacare because it was portrayed to them. I mean, this is obviously a big part of the process as well. Obamacare was portrayed to them as effectively helping black people have healthcare that white people would pay for. That's how the far-right websites have pitched it and punted it, and it's worked. So you now have huge swathes of that so-called Rust Belt. People in the forgotten corners of America who voted for Donald Trump because he promised to repeal Obamacare, because why should I be paying for some black guy in Detroit or Washington to have health insurance? I don't have any myself. That's how it was sold to them. And now they're saying, what? Obamacare was ACA? But I'm on ACA. ACA paid for my cancer treatment. ACA paid for my kid to be cured after the car crash. What? And they voted for it, and it's too late to do anything about it now. I don't know whether he will be allowed to repeal the Affordable Care Act, but I do know that we now live in a world where the concept of, and I quote, affordable care has become controversial. Poor people getting health care. And America is often a couple of years ahead of us on social change. Cheering a man who's boasting about the fact that he's going to remove healthcare from 20 million people who have never had it before. Yay. And some of the people cheering still, most of the people cheering still, many of the people cheering still, are in the 20 million. What are you cheering today? The fact that I don't have health care anymore. 2 million people a year file for bankruptcy due to unpaid medical bills in America. That means that it is the number one cause of bankruptcy in the United States. The number of them who actually had some form of health insurance is staggering. Even when you've got health insurance, you end up declaring for bankruptcy. Obama made it better. Donald Trump has promised to make it worse, and he got elected. And then I get lovely texts like this, and I promise you, most 99% of the time, I do love you. Here you go. So today the circle is complete. From the steps of Washington, the fascist liberal... They obviously mean fascist, sorry. From the steps of Washington, the fascist liberals will finally see their distorted ideology perish in front of their own eyes. We told them how foolish they were not to listen. Post-Second World War, welfare state, European Union, NHS. 3 platforms that committed the cardinal sin of treating all human beings as being in some sense the same, as being in some sense equal. You turn up at the health service, you turn up at hospital today, as I'm doing in an hour and a half's time, there could be a duke next to me on one side and an unemployed woman on the other, and we all get treated the same. You lose your job tomorrow, you go down to the labour exchange, you go down to the DSS, you go down to the job centre, whatever it was called in your era, and you all get treated the same. They might take savings into account, they might do a little bit of means testing, but your freedom to access the care is the same, whether you're a prince or a pauper. European Union, for all its sclerotic red tape and problems, tried to create the notion of a European citizen where everyone would be treated the same. So you're right when you tweet me and text me to celebrate the New World Order. But you're wrong when you think you're going to benefit from it. I might. Relatively wealthy, white, middle-class men almost always do benefit from these things. But the less you've got, the less white you are, the less male you are, because look what's happening today. In Britain, we're even having debates about whether or not women wearing skirts somehow deserve to be raped. How can you even get cross about that when you've got a man moving into the White House who boasts about sexual assaults he's committed? Everything's going backwards. Absolutely everything. And you're still cheering. Well, not you, but people are still cheering. Now, this was supposed to be an introduction to a conversation about Jeremy Corbyn's attitude to Brexit, but obviously it hasn't been. If you want to just ring in and respond to what you've heard, you can. I'll reframe the question in the next quarter, but I just want to read you something that you may or may not be aware of, in the context of just how daft we have been in the context of the last few months. I couldn't actually believe yesterday when I tweeted this how many people were surprised by it. And I want you to call me now and tell me whether you knew this. Since 2004, European law has allowed governments to control movements of EU citizens as follows. Allow EU citizens to freely circulate only for 3 months and then require them, should they want to stay longer, to show that they are working, either employed or self-employed, a registered student, or have sufficient resources, pensions, savings, to support themselves, and comprehensive sickness insurance. All those headlines about health tourism, all those commentaries you've heard about health tourism, did any of them tell you that European Union law allowed host countries to demand that migrants from other member states had to have sickness insurance? They had that in law already. Did anybody tell you that? The UK is one of the few governments that has not implemented this. And guess who was in charge of the Home Office for the 6 years in which this was not implemented? You might know her name. Theresa May. That is the department responsible for immigration. She did absolutely nothing to adopt these conditions. You have to wonder why not. You have to wonder why immigration was allowed to dominate the referendum. It's still being sold to you as a big problem. But the European Union law allowed us not only to insist that people coming here to work had health insurance, but also to insist that they had work. And if they didn't have work, they had to have pensions or savings. This is probably the most important thing I've ever told you. That is the con, right there. The law already allowed us to do all of the things that the cavalcade of con artists have told you we had to leave the European Union to do. So let's park Corbyn, actually, and let's just honestly, hand on heart, did you know that? If you did, or you didn't, tell me why you think, A, we didn't choose to be one of the EU countries that implemented these laws. Why didn't we do it? And B, why wasn't this more prominent during the referendum campaign? Because sometimes, obviously, when you're the little boy at the back of the crowd pointing at the Emperor's penis, you do have moments of wondering whether actually you're the one who's delusional and the Emperor's wearing beautiful new robes and you've got some weird, sick sexual psychosis because you're convinced he's naked. You didn't know that. No one knew that, apparently, on social media yesterday. We had the powers under European Union law to limit people being here for 3 months and to, well, insist that they leave if they didn't meet those criteria afterwards. So 2 questions. Number 1, did you know that? You voted leave. Let's not fall out. You voted leave, but if you'd known that, you wouldn't have done. 0345 6060 973. You'd have just demanded that your own government did all of the things that prompted you to vote for leave without knowing that your own government already could. And whether you knew it or not, why do you think Theresa May as Home Secretary or David Cameron as Prime Minister, why didn't they do it? I know the answer, but I want to hear yours first. It's 11:19, the number you need, and you will get through if you hit the numbers now, because things have gone a little bit bonkers. 0345 6060 973. That is the beginning and the end of this whole story, but it's too late now. It's 11:19. And it's a simple enough question. If you didn't know that the European Union law allowed us to, vet, if you like, if you want to use that word, you can. It allowed us to vet migrants from other countries, and if after 3 months they couldn't prove evidence of or provide evidence of either wealth and assets which entitled them to stay, a bit like people say about the economic migrants, the British economic migrants in Spain, or evidence that they had a job, or that even sickness insurance, then we could insist that they leave. The bit I read you before the travel news was a letter to a newspaper from last year, but this is actually from the European law. This is the actual treaty. Union citizens should have the right of residence in the host member state for a period not exceeding 3 months without being subject to any conditions or any formalities other than the requirement to hold a valid identity card or passport without prejudice to a more favourable treatment applicable to job seekers as recognised by the case law of the Courts of Justice. And then it goes on. Persons exercising their right of residence should not, however, become an unreasonable burden on the social assistance system of the host member state during an initial period of residence. So, after 3 months, you can't prove that you've got money, a job, and even health insurance. Under European law, we could have asked you to leave. So, number 1, did you know that? If not, why not? And number 2, why do you think we didn't do it more? Start with Imran, who's in Huddersfield. Imran, what would you like to say?
James, you've highlighted the problem, and you've highlighted how we've been conned. Now I think we need to come together, people who are maybe sensibly centre-right, people who are centre-left, people with no political denomination, people of all faiths and backgrounds, who feel like they've been conned, or their brothers or sisters or neighbours have been conned. We need to figure out now how to bring certain misguided or misinformed voters back to our way.
It's too late. It's too late. It's too late. Look who's in charge now. The blokes who own the Ritz, the Viscounts that own the Mail, the former pornographer that owns the Daily Express. Too late, Imran. They've won.
Come on, mate. You're an intelligent lad, right? You're almost like... You know what? A few lads within the Muslim community refer to you and a few other people as our de facto imams now. Our imams...
You've just done me more harm than good with the box of trolls, but I think I understand what you mean. But you mean preaching compassion and tolerance regardless of one's background or faith.
Absolutely, mate. See, for me now, I see people like the Archbishop of Canterbury, people like Nick Ferrari, people like yourself, okay, as kind of like faith leaders almost. And what you're trying to bring back the misguided flock who've been got at by the hatred.
Well, I don't know that everyone on that list is subscribing to the school of thought that the Leave campaign was a massive con. But answer the questions I'm asking, if you would. How I appreciate the division that you describe, but people are still cheering the division. People are still saying, "Suck it up, snowflake," as they punch themselves again in the face. Ha ha ha! Ha, look, I'm punching myself in the face, and you hate it, you soppy liberal. Suck it up, snowflake. Whack, whack. You're hitting yourself, not me. Yeah, I know. Suck it up, snowflake. It's a new world order. Why do you think people didn't know that? That simple fact about the European Union law?
Misinformation? How were we deceived? Were we deceived? And if we were deceived, why were we deceived? What do the people who own the Mail and the Express and people who attend various meetings in Davos, what did they have?
Well, most of the people in Davos didn't want you doing it again. You're bringing in too much, and I understand why, because the battlefield is so crowded. But plenty of people in Davos, whether they have our best interests at heart or not, didn't want us to leave the European Union. Simple question, Imran. Thank you, but I'm moving back to the simple point that I would suggest that I wouldn't imagine that a single rabid leaver knew that the British government was already allowed to do all of the things that taking back control is supposed to have allowed us to do. Why do you think you didn't know that? Give me a ring. Look, even if you're one of the people that will be screaming at the radio ordinarily when I just point out simple truths, give me a ring and tell me, why do you think you didn't know that? And why do you think they didn't do it? 0345 60 60973. And stop giving me a tough time for not telling you sooner. I did tell you. And I told you I'd put in freedom of information requests to the Home Office to try to find out how many people did actually fall into this category. Not how many people had been removed from the country, but how many people would qualify for removal under the rules that we actually had. Why do you think they didn't do it? Why do you think it didn't work? Why do you think you didn't know? Eileen's in Sydenham. Eileen, what would you like to say?
Oh, hello. I'll try and put it as best I can. I'm getting very confused by it all. Basically, I didn't know. I keep up to date on as much as I possibly can. I'm well read. I listen to a lot. And I didn't know the fact of this thing that you've just told us now. My problem is that Theresa May, I had heard of her,
yes,
but she sort of came up from the wings. She suddenly was made Prime Minister to everyone's surprise. Now,
Actually, hold that thought, Eileen. To Eileen in Sydenham, why didn't you know, as a relatively well-informed person, that the British government elected not to enact European law that would allow it to control movements of EU citizens, Eileen? And if you didn't know, as you've conceded, then why do you think they didn't do it?
Well, I'm starting to get a little bit worried. I can only assume that this is all a plan. Well, first of all, Theresa May comes in from the sidelines. She's made the Prime Minister. Now, to me, she wasn't a big player, but here she is. She's now Prime Minister. Now, ever since she's been in that position, she's been for the working people, and she has been for Brexit.
Well, she said that she's for the working people, yes.
I'm just saying what she's been saying.
Yeah, and she said she's for Brexit, but she, of course, voted against it.
Well, yes, she maintained she was for Remain until she became Prime Minister. Now, Brexit is like the most important thing on the agenda. It's just because 25% of the population voted in a referendum for leaving, suddenly that means everyone wants to leave and she must. So there must be something going on here, because if she was in charge of the office when all these things were being done or not done, and we weren't being told about these things, surely there must be an agenda going on here. There must be. And all I can think is that there's been a long-term plan for us to leave the EU. There must have been a long-term plan. Why is Boris still there?
Well,
Boris, the Foreign Secretary?
The barons wanted to leave. The people that own the Telegraph, who also own the Ritz Hotel, the former pornographer who owns the Express, the non-domiciled, for tax purposes, owner of the Daily Mail, who, of course, grandfather was a big fan of Oswald Mosley. They've always wanted to leave the European Union.
Right.
And they just were waiting for the right puppet to come along who could somehow pretend that the media was against her or him. And do what you need is a pseudo-posh person with a victim complex. And then you can bring the non-posh people with you. You need a pseudo-posh person with a victim complex. This is why Nick Griffin was doomed from the start. He never dressed like a gamekeeper or managed to convince people that he was actually pucker, you know. So you get a pseudo-posh person with a victim complex claiming that he's a victim, or, it's terrible. You get a bunch of billionaires. If one of them happens to own a diamond mine, then you're laughing, you're right over the line, and you get them to conspire in the con that this little fella is somehow a victim, when what he's really doing is trying to dismantle the institutions that have been put in place to protect ordinary people from barons. See? It's great, simple. Well, what are you going to do? If you want to go back to the days where those plebs over there had to tuck their forelocks at you, and you want to go back to the days where if you gave someone a job, that means that practically you got ownership of their soul. You want to go back to the days where the fella who complains about the fact that some poor woman's just given birth in the toilets because she's so frightened of taking a day off. You want to go back to the days where you can sack the fella who's complained and sack the woman who's had a baby. You want to go back to all of that, to the tyranny of wealth. What do you have to do? You have to dismantle the things that protect poor people. What are the three biggest things to protect ordinary people in Europe since the end of the Second World War? Well, in Britain, you've got the NHS and the welfare state, and then you've got the European Union. So second question, why do you think they didn't do more? Why didn't they implement this rule more? Why didn't they check out how many people actually, after 3 months in this country, were a drain on the state?
Well, I can only assume that they wanted this hate thing against immigration to build up and bubble up. And
I'm not going to go as far as you, because I'm a nicer person than you, Eileen. I'm not.
Well, I tell you what, no. I know you don't mean that. I hope you don't mean that.
Of course I don't mean that. Of course
I actually am starting to think that it's a setup, that it actually was planned.
Of course it was. Or even, I don't think they thought they were going to win, but the people who were celebrating that they did win, the blokes that own the Ritz, the blokes that own the diamond mines, the bloke that owns the Mail, the bloke that owns the Express, the bloke that owns the Sun, all these people who are cheering, and all their pseudo-posh or middle-class acolytes, they've pulled it off. I don't think they thought they were going to, so I don't know how much of a conspiracy you can claim was in place. Let me show you roughly what I mean. So just because you know I have this ability to go back over texts. Look at this. This is the sound of someone. And this is the point at which I get accused of calling him stupid. So he'll say, you're calling him. I'm not. But if someone gives you information that makes you feel stupid, the temptation is to shoot the messenger, right? So if I tell you, so if you voted Leave now, and I've just given you this piece of information that's made you feel that you've made a terrible mistake, or at least been misled, you want to accuse me of calling you stupid. I'm not calling you stupid. I'm giving you information that's making you feel stupid. It's your choice to shoot the messenger. And I guess I would if I was in the same situation. So this fella, one of my regular tweeters, to call Trump a racist is like calling Clinton a peace activist. Trump says he wants free health insurance for everyone. You forgot to mention this in your rant. Seeing as Hillary won the popular vote, why is the media saying the Russians got Trump in the White House? And it goes on. I mean, there's loads of stuff like this. And then just this today. If that EU law is so important, you would have mentioned that EU law more before the referendum. So there's a bloke, pants out Trump supporter, pants down Trump supporter, just given a tiny little bit of information that he voted without knowing, and he's trying to blame it on me. It's incredible. If that law was so important, you would have mentioned that EU law more before the referendum. If freedom of movement of people was so important, pal, you'd have looked up the laws on it before you voted. Stephen's in Vienna, in Austria. Stephen, what do you think?
Hello. Enraged because I had to go through this process in 2010 when I moved back. I'd lived in Austria before, and when I moved back, I had to go through this process after. They actually make it 4 months here, but between 3 months and 4 months, you need to prove that you're either economically viable or, as you said completely correctly, you have to demonstrate that you have the wherewithal to sustain yourself and insurance and so on. So the fact that the UK had these tools and then didn't use them drives me nuts. Particularly, as it's left me and my family and in Austria 100,000 Brits in a slightly awkward position.
Well, a position of ignorance at the moment, not knowing what your future holds. What happens when you tell people that? When you tell, because presumably like me, you've got friends who voted Leave. What happens when you tell them that the freedom of movement argument was completely bogus?
I just get a sort of nonplussed look usually. And the only reason I can think why they never went through and implemented this is because, of course, the one thing that I've also lived in Germany for a time and had to go through the same process, is because all these places have some form of address registration. You have to register where you live. I imagine for the very same people who are jumping with joy because we're coming out will be the same people who'd say, well, we can't have that because that's the thin end of the wedge to sort of identity cards and we have to.
Well, they'd be all right with migrants having to register their addresses. They just wouldn't want to register their own.
Everyone in the country.
Yes, I know that. You know that.
Has to unmailed, as they call it here.
Yes.
And of course, in order to know who's in the country, that means they know who's here, and in that process, you thereby.
I think you're overcomplicating it. I think you're overcomplicating it.
Am I?
I think so.
Maybe right.
Why didn't they do it if they could?
Well, I think they didn't want to because maybe your previous callers are right. They had a longer game.
Maybe. Or I'm going to hold my answer back. That's not too childish, is it, Stephen? I'm going to
possibly it's just the theory of cock-up.
I've got to. Well, no, it's a little bit. It's even worse than that. I mean, it is the kind of the final piece of the jigsaw. Actually, and remember, I keep mentioning the people that own the newspapers as part of this process, and I'm even if it's a bit pantomimey, I'm going to build a little bit of tension up. So, as a British bloke in Vienna, how much security do you have with regard to the future? I mean, given that Theresa May has chosen not to safeguard the residency here of our EU members, I mean, the Austrian government could act independently, couldn't it?
They could. I suspect they won't. And by the time we sort this out, unfortunately, I've lived in Austria for the bulk, all but 4 of the last 20 years.
Yes.
But sadly, I interrupted that and I came back in 2010. Now, I suspect by the time we're finally out, the 10-year limit will have passed that will allow me to declare, if I have to,
I see, yes,
for citizenship. But Austria, unfortunately, at the moment, currently has a policy whereby you're not allowed dual nationality, which I really do. I resent being put into a position where I may have to renounce my UK nationality. But I'm hoping they may, in the way of time, feel softer and more gentle towards us because we're all doing our bit, paying our taxes and the rest.
So as a British citizen, you, as a result of a vote that was allegedly taken to take back control, your future is now entirely in the hands of the Austrian government.
Partially, it depends partly on the negotiation. But I'll tell you the other thing that drove me nuts is the number of people who were disenfranchised who are living in Europe because of the 15-year rule, if you've been outside of the UK. So I have friends who've been here more than 15 years, British friends, people who work for
Yes.
other broadcasters, and for no fault of their own, they were unable to vote in a referendum that directly affected them. And that was a disgrace, but I suppose it's under the bridge now. It's all gone.
It's all gone. But I mean, this is actually the conversation we were supposed to start 45 minutes ago, which is what should Jeremy Corbyn do now, given that he's the most prominent political figure who should be offering up an alternative to Theresa May's agenda. As it is, the phone lines are full with responses to I'm going to file it under revelation, okay? So under EU law, the UK has the right to remove immigrants after 3 months if they don't fulfil work, study or healthcare criteria. Just like Stephen could have been removed from Vienna if he didn't prove to them that he had a job, and it's 4 months, so you get a little bit longer. Didn't prove to them that he either had a job, a place at a reputable educational establishment, or enough money in the bank to look after himself, and they could have added to that list. Stephen, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still there.
Do they do sickness insurance in Austria, or do they let that one slide?
No, they have a sickness insurance, but it's a slightly different system. But you pay into it as what they call Krankenkasse, but you have to pay into it. But if you're unemployed, you will be covered. So
you could have they could have gone further. They could have insisted that even though you're paying income tax and you're paying into the system, you then have to have an extra insurance on top of that in the event that you need medical help. They could have, but under EU.
I had to pay. I had to register with a freelance, what they call insurer.
There you go.
And as long, I had to demonstrate that.
And there you go. They could have done all of that here, but they didn't. Why not? 0345 606 0973. I'm tempted to stay with this until 2019, actually. Why didn't you know this? Don't get cross with me. I know you will. That fella there. Oh, if it was so important, you would have told us more. I told you 100 times. Just didn't find the right ways of explaining it. 0345 606 0973. Why do you think you didn't know? Now you do know. All along. The Home Secretary. What's her name? Where's she gone now? Faded into obscurity. Theresa something. All along as Home Secretary, she had the power to impose the 3-pronged criteria. Work, study, assets. If you don't have them, you don't stay. And if she wanted to, health insurance as well. This is the biggest one ever, isn't it? It's 11:46. Question is simple. Since 2004, European Union law has allowed governments to insist that if you want to move here from another European Union country, you have to prove after 3 months that you've got a job, that you've got enough money to support yourself in the absence of a job, or that you've got a place at a reputable educational establishment. Reputable educational establishment. They could also go further and insist that you took out some form of independent health insurance. How do I know this? Well, I got friends that are cosmopolitan and live in places like Germany and Austria. And if you don't, then we've already had a caller from Vienna to describe that is what has happened there. Same sort of thing happens in Germany. So why didn't you know that? 0345 606 0973. Why didn't they do it? Theresa May was Home Secretary. She's taking us out of the single market in order to control borders that she could already have controlled as Home Secretary. Or I'm missing something. And I know I sometimes say that in a what's the word when you don't really mean it? In a rhetorical way. What am I missing? Answer nothing. Sometimes I do that. But here I just might be, because it's so huge. And I just thought everybody, not everybody, I just thought people knew this. 0345 606 0973 is the number that you need. Damien's in Islington. Pick whatever question you want and answer it, Damien.
James, hello, good morning.
Hello to you.
I've been listening to you over the last few months since the result of the referendum, and my heart sinks more and more every day. And
you don't miss mystery hour, do you? I mean, we do occasionally get the smiles back up, but obviously we are in the business of reporting reality.
Yeah, no, but James, I don't think we were meant to know. The thing that makes me most depressed about this revelation is that why didn't the Guardian and the pro-Remain media pick up on this and broadcast it from the rooftop?
They did.
And nobody listened.
They did, and there's two responses to it. Number one is the kind of visceral one, which is, well, I refuse to believe that, even if it is written down in front of me. I mean, look what's happening in America today. This isn't unique to Britain. I refuse to believe that because I just saw a foreigner.
Yeah.
So you've got this, and also look at my newspapers. It's full of foreigners taking the mickey. They're all claiming benefits, having 74 children and living in mansions in Belgravia. I know the truth. I know what the truth is. I don't care what the actual law is. I see with my own eyes. Look at it. We were about to march on the Supreme Court the other day, weren't we? Because judges are the enemies of the people. Once it's out of the bottle, you can't get it back in again. Once race hate is out there and defining politics, you can't get it back in there. And the other reason, I think, I kind of know, the reason why they haven't done it, not the reason why you didn't know, the reason why they didn't do it was because hardly anybody actually failed to fulfill those criteria.
Well, there you go, the arguments as you stated it. But James, I wonder, could I ask you to zoom out of the whole thing? Because I came from the debate from a very Irish
Yes.
approach. My family are Irish. I spend a lot of time there, and I found it fascinating to hear that point of view when the heat of the debate was happening at the time. And the most revealing description I heard was that the UK were never enthusiastic members of the European Union right from the word go. They were kept out by de Gaulle until 1973.
Yeah.
England and the UK and Ireland went in on the same day, and it was never a very happy marriage. And I think that's something that causes me great sadness. The main reason I wanted to remain was because of the peace initiatives that happened between the UK and Northern Ireland. I mean, there was so much good work there that was just jettisoned overnight by people putting the cross in the box, and that fills me with great dismay. But is there a way forward? I mean,
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I guess Theresa May's decided that there isn't. That all you can do is just keep feeding the genie. Once you've let this. And it's essentially race hate. I know that upsets an awful lot of people when I say that, and there are some sort of frenzied arguments about sovereignty, but all the people who made the arguments about sovereignty insisted that we wouldn't be leaving the single market. You're just allowed to stand up in public now and say things that 20 years ago would have had you shot down in flames for being a hate-filled bigot. And I don't know what other choice she has, because the bigots are in charge. They're just waiting always in the background. Always, these barons, these lords, these viscounts, these pornographers in chief, always waiting in the background for a chance just to get the boot back on the throat of the working man and woman of Britain. And we've done it. And what's amazing is that half the country, 52% of the country, have voted to have the boot back on their throat. What are you going to be once unions have been completely dismantled and workers' rights have been sacrificed upon the altar of drawing businesses to Britain? There are only two groups of people left after that. However you voted, whatever your politics are, when you remove the protection of workers, when you remove the regulations that prevent businesses from exploiting people and endangering people, remember, the first thing they do, they give it a comedy name to try to undermine its importance. So they'll call it human rights, spelt with a Y, or elfin safety, spelt with an F. That's what they do. Which side are you going to be on? There's only going to be two sides left. There's going to be owners and there's going to be workers. Actually, that's not quite true. And then there'll be non-workers. But loosely speaking, there's going to be 2 teams left standing post-Brexit, post-Trump as well in America. You're going to be an owner? You're going to own the means of production? Or are you going to be a worker? Because unless you're going to be an owner, you haven't just punched yourself in the face, you've blown your bloody head off. Richard's in Windsor. Richard, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello, Richard.
Yeah, just listening to you talking about going on about this until 2019, I'd be perfectly happy for you to do so. I
Bless you.
Make a living from making jokes at the expense of Brexit, so I'm perfectly happy for you to carry on.
Okay, good.
The reason for the main reason you said, why didn't people know? And I put this squarely at the feet of David Cameron, who was very much the face of the Remain campaign, whether he wanted to be that face or not. And the simple fact is, he could never say, well, we can get rid of them, we can limit them, because it leads very nicely into the question, why didn't you then?
Yeah.
Which is ultimately an admission of failure on his part. So there was no way for them to include this in the campaign without equally admitting our government is doing a bad job.
And actually, it would go back to Labour, because they've had the ability to do it since 2004, except that it isn't necessarily evidence of doing a bad job. It's a failure to address. I think okay, let's slightly complicate things now, because I will join you in putting the blame at the feet of the proper politicians as opposed to the pretend ones. But the reason you don't fight the immigration argument is because it's very helpful to you if you're running down the health service for everybody else to think that it's the fault of immigration. The reason why you don't point out the myths being perpetrated about immigration with regard to wages is great news if you're a conservative, pro-austerity politician, because if immigrants are getting the blame for wages stagnating or going down, then it's great. The people who really deserve the blame, i.e. you, who've introduced these policies and have undermined things like minimum wage legislation, that's great. That's why they didn't go in harder. The question of why they didn't actually start removing people who didn't fulfill these criteria is even more insidious, because there's hardly any of them.
Correct.
And we voted to take back control.
Well, absolute control is the big issue.
But you voted Remain anyway, didn't you?
I did, yes.
So what I've got... See, go on.
100% Remain.
No, I don't know anyone who was 100% Remain, but still, yeah, I'm more Remain now than I was before the vote.
Yes, absolutely.
I think everybody is. Even people who voted Leave are going to be a little less Leave, even if you're still convinced, because now you know that the bankers really are moving, and we really are pulling out of the single market, and we really are paying more for our food, and we really are seeing our currency plummet. But it could all go good again. I made that absolutely clear. Everybody hopes it will go good again. But here is the average British punter in a nutshell. If what Mr. James O'B is saying on at LBC is true, I would have voted Remain. I can't help feeling he's somehow twisting it as usual, though. And do you know why you think I twist stuff? Do you know why it looks like when I present you with unvarnished facts, printed in the law books of the European Union? Do you know why it looks like I twist stuff? Because you are looking at the world through a distorting lens. And that distorting lens is 80 to 85% of the media. Events in Washington, of course, it's the middle of the night effectively there, but still the excitement is building. I just had a quick chat with Chris, who's producing me this week, and what should we do? Should we crack on with this? Because I genuinely think we should continue having this conversation. If a liar wins a battle by telling lies, the first thing they'll do is tell everybody else to move on. Okay, let's move on now. The battle's over. We won. You lost. Suck it up. But if you've won it by lying, you're going to make that call even louder. What have you done? I've won a battle. How did you win it? By telling some fairly humongous lies. Well, what happens next? Well, I've got to make sure we stop talking about it, haven't I? Otherwise, I'm going to slowly lose credibility, respect. In fact, you haven't really got any. Yeah, but I have with the people that believed the lies. So let's shut up, everybody else. Shut up, get over it. I tell you what we need to do first. Let's think up some funny names. It's worked for human rights, turned humans against human rights. It's worked for health and safety. You've got significant swathes of the population who desperately desire to be less safe and less healthy at work. Well, we need a new name for these people we've just beaten by lying. What are we going to call them? How about buffooners? Boris is on our side. I don't know. Ramonas. It's brilliant. Let's call them Ramonas and tell them all to shut up. And then hopefully, because I hold the voting public in such astonishingly low regard, otherwise I couldn't have made a career out of telling lies to them, I reckon I can get them to start doing the shouting for me. Shut up, you Ramonas. Shut up, you Ramonas, with your boring truths. That's where we are now. So sorry, I'm not going to shut up. Listen, if we'd taken a democratic vote to put a drunk bloke in charge of the plane, I'd be screaming until he drives us, he flies us right into the side of that mountain. I just would. I'm weird like that. You can sit there going, well, we voted to put a drunk bloke in charge of the plane and we're heading towards the mountainside, but hey, we've got our country back. I'm not going to do that. A democratic vote to put a drunk bloke in charge of an aeroplane, I'm screaming stop right up until the moment we hit the mountainside. So are an awful lot of people. But do you know what the weirdest thing about the country we call home is now? In my profession, there's hardly anyone. How weird is that? In my profession, there is hardly anyone saying, well, that's a lie. That's a lie. Oh, look, here's a little bit of European Union law. Turns out that Theresa May, since 2010, was completely free to refuse residency to anybody who didn't have a job, didn't have enough money, didn't have health insurance, or didn't have a place to study at a reputable educational establishment. Why didn't you know that? 0345 606 0973. Two possible responses. I don't know, James, but I feel conned. Or, shut up, you Ramona! It's A or B. This really is binary. Why didn't you know that? If it really was the big issue during this whole referendum campaign, why didn't you know the single most important fact about it? Because they didn't want you to know. Because they wanted you to vote in ignorance. Because the only way you'll vote against your own interests is when you do vote in ignorance. And what happens when people like me stood up and said the laws are already there? They say, rubbish. Don't trust Brussels. Don't trust this. Anyway, I saw a foreigner yesterday. The rhetoric must be true. I don't know what we do next. Peter is in Battersea. Peter, what made you pick up the phone?
Yes, hi. Can I just say I felt your analysis, your introduction was perfect. Although I would have also added, in addition to Alf Garnett, I would have added that that series. You're probably too young to remember. What's it called now? It's called...
I've got to be honest with you, mate. I just did some of my best work in that introduction, and now I've got you coming on, albeit with some nice complimentary words. I don't want you umming and ahhing about 1970s television. We need to, come on, let's throw some faggots on the fire. Let's get this party started.
No. Okay. The point I'm trying to make is this, that I think at the end of the day, I think you are providing an excuse for the ordinary British English working man. I think actually most people here don't like foreigners.
Rubbish.
Don't like
rubbish.
No. I'm not talking about people from London.
No. They don't like what they've been told about foreigners. But you just you do to. No, I'm not having it. I'm a patriot. I'm not going to let you call my fellow citizens racists.
No. Well, that's the point. You don't like what I'm saying. See,
no, I don't.
I don't know how often you travel up north or east or west. I do it a lot.
Several times a month.
In my job. And I'll tell you what, they hate coming to London. Why?
London.
Because of the amount of the multiculturalism in London. They hate it. And I tell you what, okay? And I tell you what, people say, it wasn't about that. It was something else. But when you chip at its core, it's all about, these people. It's all about making an excuse because these people are making my life uncomfortable, making my life unbearable. They're taking resources, etc.
I listen. Yeah, I hear you.
They weren't prepared. They weren't prepared to accept any truth. They weren't. Even if you told them about this law, I knew about that law. I know about that law, the EU law. But even if you told them that, okay, they wouldn't have listened because people wanted to leave. Get it in. It's not about telling the truth. It's that the people wanted to leave, and that's the most honest aspect about it. They wanted to leave.
But why?
And it was an honest reaction.
But why?
I disagree. I'm a Remainer.
No, but why did they want to leave? Because they believed that their lives were being damaged by immigration. No, and that the government was powerless to do anything about it.
No, I don't think it goes back to them thinking that immigrants have damaged their lives. They just don't like immigrants.
Oh, no, okay. Listen, I hear you. I don't agree with you. I recognise a lot of what you describe, but I'm a Christian, mate, and I think that if people are shown the light, they will see it. They're not shown the light, I'll give you that. If I confined my news intake, if I left school at 16 and confined my news intake to the Sun, I'd probably be persuaded that old Pavel over there is the end of civilization as I know it in my hometown. But Show people the light, and they'll see it. It's a choice to be in darkness. It's taken by a relatively small number of people. The majority are led into the darkness by self-serving, well, lickspittles in the pay of the owning classes. It's not Marxism. I'm not suggesting that the means of production have to be put in the hands of the workers. I'm just suggesting that if you want to look after the workers, you don't put the owners first. Peter, thank you. Gabriel is in Highbury. Gabriel, what would you like to say?
Hi, I just want to say I actually took a lot for me to call in. I tried to not call in because I'm trying to do a lot more listening and less speaking. But
yes.
I just want to say...
It's not an option I have, unfortunately.
Fair enough. But I just feel it's all of our responsibilities. I think we always look around for someone to blame. We're trying to say that people are blaming immigrants, and now we're trying to find politicians to blame. But I'm assuming that this law was a publicly accessible document.
Yeah, of course it is. I mean, all you have to do is Google EU laws, freedom of movement. I did it for the first time about 4 years ago during a phone-in show.
Yeah, and so I sort of feel a lot like in a democracy only works if the citizenry holds politics to account. We are the last line of defence to make sure it works. And so if we're not doing our job, then it falls apart. And I think this is a result of that. It's civic ignorance, where we're not doing our job. We're not looking things up because we're too busy. We're too bored. We don't find it interesting. Who wants to read a 5,000-page document on legal jobs?
When you've got the choice, a 5,000-page document or a meaningless slogan that makes you feel as if someone's going to get a slap in the face that will improve the quality of your life.
Yeah. Yeah, that's...
And the ultimate proof of what you describe? The ultimate proof of what you describe when the citizenry and the media, and in America, actually, the media is better than it is here, but they completely, obviously, got blindsided by Trump. The conclusive apotheosis of what you've just described is Donald Trump saying on the record that he thinks he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and his fans would still love him.
Yeah, wow. Oh, wow. Wow. I always forget that happened, but oh, wow.
That's a normal reaction to my radio broadcasting there, Gabriel. Thank you for your kind. Oh, wow, 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 oh, wow. 12:12 is the time. So, listen, let's not fall out, you and I, if you voted to leave and you've suddenly gone, oh, my God, I didn't know that. Just tell me why you think you didn't know. That's all I want. You don't need to change your vote or change your mind or say sorry or anything like that. Why do you think you didn't know that Home Secretary Theresa May had the powers to do all of the things that she now says she's free to do for the first time because we voted to leave? And think of Stephen in Vienna, 4 months jumping through all the hoops that the crypto-fascists and the Tweedy lickspittles have spent the last couple of years telling you the British government couldn't do. Why do you think you didn't know? Gary's in St Albans. Gary, what would you like to say?
Well, the reason they probably didn't know is they didn't think it through with the same amount of care that the Home Secretary was advised to think it through. One of the big problems is, you see, we find somebody in, I don't know, Sheffield, and they have been out of work for 3 months, and we say, well, that's it, I'm afraid. You're on your way back. But they put them on the aircraft, they send them back to where they went to, they get back on the next aircraft and come back again. They are now an EU citizen with full rights to come to the United Kingdom and seek work.
No, so you've misunderstood absolutely everything about this topic, mate.
Oh, right, go on then.
Well, they come here.
Yes.
They prove that they've got either money, work, or a place to study at a reputable educational establishment.
Yes, they can easily do that. They will have that money. I've seen.
So what's the problem then, if they're paying their way?
What you do is you create, somebody lends you 3,000 quid and says,
okay.
well, that'll pay for your studies. You have no intention of doing it.
So why do you think you didn't know about this law?
And the other thing,
I love the way you're trying to excuse your own ignorance, but let's examine the ignorance first. Why didn't you know about this law?
Officer.
Why didn't you know about this law?
Time to time asked to give my opinion on things
Why didn't you know about this law?
I did know about the law, but it was never implemented because it was a pointless law.
Oh, so why did they implement it in Germany and Austria?
No, it was just a waste of money because, as I said, what happens is if you get turfed out of the country...
Yeah, it works in Germany and Austria. Why?
I don't know. I've not the faintest.
No, well, I'll tell you what. You find out and then ring me, and it possibly will be slightly less embarrassing than this call. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. Yeah, because they borrow £3,000, James, and they get back on the plane, and yeah, they are. Look, I don't care that we had the positions and the laws in place to actually deal with this problem. I refuse to accept that there wasn't a problem at all. Oh, mate, bless you. Seriously, I'll light a candle for you on Sunday. Now, the thing is, going to be talking about Donald Trump this hour, but Chris and I had a conversation during the 12 noon news and realised it's exactly the same topic. This is the one thing, I think, upon which everyone can agree. There are massive similarities in relationships between Brexit and Trump. They're both massive con jobs. And it's a con that is dependent upon refusing to accept that you've been conned, even when you're provided with incontrovertible evidence of it. That's what a con is. So what do I do now? Because my phone lines are groaning under the weight of people still waiting to tell me why they think they didn't know about this law. Except Gary, of course, he did know about it, but he just decided that it didn't work, even though other European Union governments have implemented it quite successfully. Let's throw Trump in on the side as well. Let's find reasons to be cheerful. Best case scenarios for a Donald Trump presidency. Be sensible. He's not going to reopen coal mines or build a wall between... Well, maybe he'll build a wall between Mexico and America, but he's not going to be able to get Mexico to pay for it. Best case scenario for me is by the time he leaves the White House, we're all still alive. That's my best case scenario under Donald Trump. The king of the deal makers who failed to book a Bruce Springsteen tribute band for his own inauguration. So what's the best case scenario for you? And on the other stuff, what's going on? Best case scenario for a Trump presidency. Don't be silly or funny, but you can be positive or negative. I'd try just to listen, but obviously I suppose if you're going to buy into some of the Kool-Aid enhanced claims, then we're probably going to do that really annoying thing called throwing facts at a lie. And also, speaking of throwing facts at a lie, the European Union law allows host countries to insist that after a 3-month acclimatisation period, any visitors from other European member states who haven't found work or can prove a degree of wealth or have a place at an educational establishment can be made to leave. They're not welcome. It is something that, as we've heard from callers, this is the thing that flies in the face of these sort of issues and problems. You actually speak to people who know about it rather than people who've read about it in the Daily Bugle. So we speak to people in Vienna. Yeah, I had to do this. I had loads of emails. Germany and Austria, definitely. I don't know off the top of my head what other countries do this, but other countries do it. They impose this law that we could have imposed since 2004. Why didn't we? Well, this is the real Gordian knot of the whole Brexit brouhaha. The reason why we didn't is because it wasn't worth it. There weren't enough people falling into that criteria to justify the effort that would be needed to get rid of the tiny number of people who failed to fulfill those criteria. How do I know that? Because I kept putting Freedom of Information requests into the Home Office asking how many people after 3 months in this country hadn't done any of these things. And then I sort of let it slide. Do you know, the bloke I asked to look into that for me ended up working at Downing Street. I'm sure that's just a coincidence. 23 minutes after 12. Nick is in Crystal Palace. Best case scenario for the Trump presidency. Nick?
That it forces the Democratic Party to reform to become the working class party again.
How will they do that? I mean, this is the challenge for all kind of what you'd call realist politicians, whether they're left, right, or in, out, or shaking it all about. When people are told that they've lost their jobs because of X, Y, or Z, and the truth is that they've lost their jobs because of technology and modernity, how do you reclaim those people? How can you find an unemployed coal miner or an underemployed former steel worker in the Rust Belt of America and tell him something that's going to comfort him that isn't a lie, like, oh, I'm going to reopen your coal mines, or I'm going to make the Mexicans pay your wages?
Okay, so I think the Democratic Party should never have even lost in Pennsylvania, firstly, and if they had a proper person, well, they did have an opportunity to have a proper person, in my view, Bernie Sanders.
Yes.
He would have been able to bring on those sorts of people. I know that
you're sounding a little bit vague, but I'd rather have vague than pants down dishonest.
Okay, so let me be more clearer. About 7 days ago, or about a week ago, I'm not sure the exact time.
That's the same. 7 days is a week.
sorry, Sanders put in an amendment to change a bill to basically import drugs from Canada to cheapen medical bills for the people of his constituency and other constituencies. He managed to get Republicans on board. He managed to get people like Ted Cruz. Now, he's not a socialist. He managed to get John McCain on board. He managed to get all these people on board. 12 Democrats went against him. One of those was Cory Booker. And the problem is with the Democratic Party, and this is where I think they're failing at the moment, is they want everyone to talk about Russia because they don't want anyone to talk about that they were unfair to them.
I don't know that that's true, but it's a very, very astute observation. You mean they don't want to talk about the massive clangor they dropped by electing the candidate they elected?
Yeah, I mean...
no, I buy that, but we're getting off message. Okay, the Democrats might do well, but I was thinking more about what Trump will do. Best case scenario for a Trump presidency without reference to the opposition.
Best case scenario for Trump's presidency is he doesn't live up on some of his promises.
Best case scenario is that he carries on lying.
Yeah.
Look where we are now. Best case scenario is that he stays true to form and doesn't do any of the things that he said he's going to do. 0345 6060973. Daniel's in Hackney. Trump or Brexit, Daniel?
First of all, I just want to thank you for taking my call.
You're very welcome.
I'm interested in talking about Brexit. I'm from African origin, and I got EU citizenship, and then I moved into this country in 2005. After 2005, all these laws were in place. When I moved into this country, I didn't have the right to stay. I went to the Home Office. They told me the only way I could stay in this country is to come with the proof that I've got a job. So I went looking for employment, and I got the proof. Then I went to the Home Office with that proof before they gave me what they call registration certificate. So that registration certificate now entitled me to go out and then look for a job. So after I got a job, I worked for 4.5 years to be precise, and then I went to university, okay? So when I went to university and I graduated, I got a job. I work in NHS at the moment. That's a different story. I don't want to go into that because of all the lies about NHS and immigrants. And then when it was time for me to renew my wife's residency, the Home Office refused to renew my wife's residency because they said when I went to university, I breached the condition under which I was legally allowed to stay with my family in this country because I did not have a health certificate for my family. All right?
Yes.
All these laws are in place, but these politicians, they lie to the British people. They refuse to tell them the truth. When
Why do you think this was so misunderstood?
For me, it's like all around the world these days, people are very happy to listen to what interests them, what pleases them. So there's a philosopher that says that if you continue to tell tell lies to the people, and if you continue to repeat the same lie over and over, eventually they'll begin to believe it. It's like
they begin from a starting point in some cases of wanting to believe it, and we heard that call. No, I know, but we heard the caller earlier who was already trying to convince himself that this isn't a meaningful law, despite the fact that so many other European Union countries did it. And you factor in that also the massive miscalculation for the so-called A8 countries, the 8 former communist countries that joined at around the same time that this law became enacted, and you have really just the perfect storm for your classic sort of hate preachers. A big influx of people, unexpected, whether it's the refugee crisis of this last year or whether it is the inflow of workers from the 8 newly sort of acceded states that came here. I think Ireland and Sweden were the only other countries that didn't have transitional arrangements in place. We could have done. Tony Blair elected not to. Jack Straw, I think, was Home Secretary at the time. This isn't party political. And there you've got it. So that was the big influx crisis then that created the toxic atmosphere, and then the refugee crisis doubled down on the toxic atmosphere, and the vote went the way that it went. Thank you, Daniel. I want a little more on Trump because obviously it's countdown now to him actually getting his Oh, Lord. His tiny little hands on the nuclear codes. I told you so is never attractive. But you remember earlier when I said to you that if you've successfully conned people, the very, very first thing you need to do next is get the people who've been conned to shout down and seek to silence anybody who's pointing out the con. Yeah, you remember that? So we put out a little clip of me explaining this rather epic gap in the knowledge of most people who voted in the referendum, let alone most people who voted one way or the other. And the replies are beautiful. I mean, a true thing of beauty. I say, first thing you do if you've been conned is try and silence all the people telling you you've been conned. You say, does he ever stop banging on about Brexit? I bet he was an awful child, forever moaning and throwing tantrums when he didn't get his way. Doesn't solve the problem that 77,000 EU nationals came to the UK last year, job hunting. Do you understand supply and demand? Leave it alone and move on. Broken record. The reality is that we are leaving. I've heard your argument 1,000 times. Let's move on now. Either you're yanking my chain on this, and you're sending in these tweets and texts to prove me completely right in the hope that I'll not realise that you're yanking my chain, or you're just proving me completely right again. Warren is in Staining. Back to America, Warren. What would you like to say? Best case scenario.
Hello, James. Love the show as usual.
Good man.
Best case scenario is an interesting one. I'm a little bit worried about what Trump is going to do, but I think some of the good things he is going to be able to do, and has already started to do, is get the jobs back into the US market. Ford Motor Company is a good example of that. And I think although he divides people's thinking, I think he's also going to bring
I think Ford have suggested possibly 800 jobs, and when you dig into it, it looks as if perhaps most of those would have stayed in America anyway.
But I think
there's 800 jobs. Barack Obama's just presided over the longest and largest period of job creation in generations. Unemployment in America is incredibly low. He might create jobs, but there won't be people to do the jobs unless he increases immigration, which he's pledged to reduce. Oh, let's say that again. That's the thing of beauty. He might create jobs, but there won't be people to do the jobs unless he increases immigration, which he's promised to reduce. That's Trump in a nutshell, Warren.
True. But you're looking for a positive. I think one of the things that you've got to think about is he has done that and influenced that even before he becomes the 45th president. So if he can get the business people to think about things in a non-political way and look at it as business deals in a more robust way for the US market, I think he potentially could bring more work, more jobs, more opportunities back into the deprived areas of Detroit and other areas.
What sort of jobs? What sort of jobs would he bring into the deprived areas of Detroit?
If it's in the motor industry, there's all the ancillary business.
But did you hear what the head of BMW said when Donald Trump complained about Germans not buying enough American cars? Did you hear what he said?
No.
Build better cars.
Well, I've owned American cars all my life, and I actually think they're quite
you'd rather have a Mercedes, though, wouldn't you?
Possibly. I prefer a Jeep, but yeah, that's not...
James O'Brien owns Jeep driver Warren. I'm sure that, I'm not suggesting American cars are dodgy, but they're not BMW and Mercedes. They're not the top marks on...
No, they're a different... I mean, a Jeep is by far a better 4x4 than a BMW 4x4.
Sure.
But, yeah, putting cars to one side, I think the other thing I'm hoping he'll be able to do is he runs successful businesses,
he's run a lot of bankrupt businesses as well, more than you ever will.
But then, true, but he knows what works and what doesn't work.
Does he?
It can lead to businesses failing.
I hope you're right. Listen, you can tell from my sceptical tone that I don't think you are. I mean, he's worked incredibly hard to be born rich, is essentially what you're telling me, and some of the money that he inherited he's managed to increase, but if he'd stuck it all in a post office account on the day that his dad died, he'd probably be richer now than he is as a result of all his business adventures. But he has a reputation, doesn't he, Warren, as a big deal maker? It's just embarrassing he couldn't book a Bruce Springsteen tribute band for his own inauguration.
Yeah, but is that him that books that, or is that one of his staff that's got it wrong? I mean, I think...
Well, you can't do that, because the whole project is about him. He's the deal maker. He's the businessman. He's the man with the plan and the answers. And he can't get a Bruce Springsteen tribute band for his...
But he has to have people around him to support him in that. And if he's been let down, ultimately his head on the block.
And the people around him include his son-in-law and 6 former Goldman Sachs bankers. His son-in-law, of course, also inherited a small fortune from his property developer father. Is that draining the swamp, do you think?
It's changing the swamp.
It's not.
Turning the water over.
It-
You
well,
potentially have people coming
Oh, I
into
love
it
you.
that aren't just the yes people.
So you think the
They
people
aren't
in the
just
people in the
fans of
Rust Belt
politics.
who voted for change thought that there'd be 6 Goldman Sachs bankers with more combined wealth than any cabinet in the history of America running
You're
the show?
probably right, as always, but I think the thinking has to change in politics.
Yeah, but it's not. It's
And I
not
think-
going to, though, is it? He's ridden in, just like Brexit, on that tiger that demands change. We hate things. Have you seen that cartoon? It's a kid in his bedroom says, "I want change. I'm going." So he smashes everything up, changing it. And he stands there in the third frame of the cartoon, just looking at the absolute carnage that he's created. Oh, okay, well, you got change. You've changed less than perfect stability for absolute chaos. Martin's in Mill Hill. Martin, what would you like to say?
Morning, James.
Hello, Martin.
We couldn't have implemented sending people back anyway. That's the problem, because we have no systems. If you come in under the from the rest of the world system, all your details are taken down. Because if you came in from
You heard Daniel explaining how he did have to jump through these hoops. Just the caller before last.
But he was in Austria.
No, that was Stephen. Daniel was in Mill Hill.
Well, he had to. Well, he did have to.
Yes, you were already on the switchboard when he was talking to me.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Well, you do now.
I didn't think we could pick up the details of people.
No, we don't have central registration in the way that some of these countries do, but that could have been fixed. That could have been changed.
Ah, but the point is, it wasn't.
No, but the point is, the system is already in place, and Daniel had to obey elements of it. You can't say, well, the question isn't why didn't they do it 20 years ago. The question is, why didn't they tell you during the referendum campaign that they had the powers to do it since 2004? Why do you think that was?
Well, to do what? That's what they wouldn't.
To make sure that people moving here from European Union countries had to either have assets, jobs, or a place to study, or sickness insurance. They had the powers to do it. How are they going to explain to you why they didn't? And your answer is because they didn't have the system in place. So my question then becomes, why didn't they put the system in place?
Because it wasn't worth it, because everybody that came in essentially fulfilled all the criteria.
Boom.
That's the point.
Exactly.
That is exactly, you made that point.
Yes.
But it does lead on to another point.
Because most European, or almost all of these so-called European economic migrants were employed, are employed, have jobs, pay taxes.
But they've all got jobs which paid low taxes.
Well, that's not true, unfortunately. The average tax contribution of a European Union migrant worker, because don't forget that's going to include all the German bankers and the French sort of financial experts, is slightly above the average tax contribution of a so-called indigenous worker. But I guess, in a way, that proves the point in a way that you weren't intending. Trump, best case scenario. Barry is in Norwood. Barry, what would you like to say?
Oh, hello. Sorry, I wasn't going to talk about Trump.
All right, don't worry. Back to Brexit.
Talk about Trump.
No, I know what you mean.
Brexit. Oh, it's painful. But I've been doing habitual residence decisions for years, about 10 years.
Well, you've been doing the stuff that Martin
Says doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been around for years. If you've got to have worked so you can get benefits, and I've been telling everybody that for years. Now all these migrants come over here and get everything for free, and I'm explaining that I do the decision making. I do it. You can see it. You have to have worked. You have to be.
I tell you what, mate. I spend a lot of time banging my head against the metaphorical brick wall, but I think I'm an amateur compared to you. If you've actually been doing this job for 10 years and trying to tell people it's the job that I actually do, and they're telling you in a way that you don't exist.
That's exactly. I don't really call up much anymore because it's too painful. People don't want to hear the truth. They don't want to hear anything. They've decided already, and they just look around for what enforces their decision, and they keep going. And I think there is something much more insidious about this whole process, because everyone knows, right, if you really look, that the law is there, that you can control migration. It's always been there. They know this, but they choose not to.
Also, I'm thinking about, I don't know why, and it won't last, but this sort of curious little corner of the media that I've managed to carve out, where I've managed to combine facts with what I guess they call populism these days. When you try and think of what the newspaper equivalent would be, who's going to get the clicks? The columnist who's writing about the Latvian mother in Leeds who's got 77 children and a small castle off the state, or about the massive majority of these people that you are vetting and checking, who are just quietly going on with working and contributing? Who's going to win the battle of the columnists?
Well, the thing is, in order for them to, look at what they've managed to do by saying all of that, by putting the blame over there, by pointing the finger like Hitler did. I don't like to say it, but just when you use somebody so you can do something else. And meanwhile, you're taking away rights, you're taking away benefits, you're taking away healthcare, you're taking away your social care. You're doing all of this. At the same time, you keep pointing the finger over there. Keep looking. It's the biggest contrict.
Stealing your biscuits.
It was just.
And where does it go next? This is the thing. I don't know if you saw the Daily Mail yesterday. They've already started trying to blame any future problems caused by Brexit on Lily Allen.
Oh yeah, you can't think about other people. You're not allowed, because
I had to read it again after the show, Barry. I had to just go back and check it. It was literally.
Did you hear Theresa May talking about how we've gone too far with this individualism? It's your party. It's your party that told us that we are.
Look, you know what? They're looking at it. They're looking at Brexit and Trump, and they're thinking, do you know what? We've been idiots for the last 20 years. Us right-wingers who thought that we had to at least sort of pretend that we weren't trying to reintroduce the notion of a downtrodden workers. We've been idiots. Look, first of all, we did it with the welfare over at the DWP. And now we've sort of seen it on a referendum and an election in America. Let's stop pretending. Let's just go out and tell lies. Just straight lies. Yeah, we're here to help you. We're here to help you. Thwack. Yeah, we're here. Yeah, we're taking back control. Poof, right in the belly. Yeah, we're what else is there? Making America great again. Yeah, okay. Tweak your nipples. It's just awful. Awful. Best case scenarios for the Donald Trump presidency, and then I'm going to end the programme with a sort of 5-minute montage that is a sort of rear view mirror on what we can expect from the new American president. The baton will be handed on to Sheila Fogarty, and by the time Ian Dale comes on air later, we'd have actually, as a radio station, crossed the Atlantic. Best case scenario. I like that, made me chuckle. Lily Allen, says Arthur, they might as well blame Woody Allen. This was a remarkable piece in the Daily Mail yesterday suggesting that if Brexit turns out not to be the unalloyed jamboree and party that the Daily Mail has spent the last 2 years telling its readers it would be, then the blame would lie not with the cheerleaders or the architects of Brexit, but Lily Allen. It'll all be Lily Allen's fault. It's astonishing. I get quite a lot of bile on social media, but I'm a bloke, so I don't get half what she gets. That's the direction we're leading the civilised world back in. Do you know that there's a Republican politician who's already been arrested for sexually assaulting a woman because he said he thought he was allowed to, effectively, now that political correctness had been got rid of by Donald Trump? So he literally grabbed a woman by her proverbials. And it's not a defence, obviously, in the sense that it's not an excuse, but his explanation was that kind of, political correctness. It's just locker room talk, though, don't forget. Ian's in Yateley. Ian, best case scenario.
Hi there. Thank you for having me on the programme. Okay, the best case scenario for Donald Trump being the president is that I believe he will unify America. I believe that he will absorb the UK into a new kind of block of, Western forward-thinking civilization, really.
What do you mean by Western? Will it include Germany and France?
No, definitely not.
So you mean English speaking?
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And white, mostly white, because he's not got a strong track record with ethnic minorities in America. He called them all rapists, and he wants to ban all Muslims from the country. So he's not going to unify them, is he?
No, he's.
So he's going to unify white English speakers.
No. Obviously,
no. Okay, he's going to unify white English speakers who like him.
No, he's going to unify America as it is. The Mexicans, all the rest of them are going to unify behind him.
Why?
Because I think the press have taken it out of context what he said.
Which bit?
It around. The bit where he said they were rapists and that, and
they didn't take it out of context. We watched the speech, Ian. How do you take that out of context? He stood behind a podium and said the words, and we all saw it. How do you take that out of context?
Well, I personally interpreted it I didn't interpret literally what he meant, you know, because that would be ridiculous, wouldn't it? You know, that would be like...
So how did you interpret it?
I just thought that he kind of hinted at, you know... That
so he hinted that all Mexicans were rapists?
It was a suggestion that there was
because
a possibility.
To claim it would be ridiculous, given that all you'd have to do to prove that he was an idiot was find a single Mexican who wasn't a rapist. I bet Ian's right. Sometimes things do get taken out of context. This is my little inauguration day gift to the enlightened people listening to the programme.
I'm the only one on the stage that said we should not go into Iraq.
Are you for invading Iraq?
Yeah, I guess so. You know, I wish it was. I wish the first time it was done correctly.
I'm very pro-life.
I'm very pro-choice.
Do you believe in punishment for abortion? Yes or no, as a principle?
There has to be some form of punishment.
I am pro-choice in every respect.
She has no natural talent to be president.
She's very talented, and she has a husband that I also like very much.
Hillary Clinton was the worst Secretary of State in the history of the United States.
Hillary Clinton, how did she do as Secretary of State? Probably above and beyond everybody else.
Let's say Hillary is president.
Hillary Clinton, I think, is a terrific woman. I think she really works hard, and I think she does a good job, and I like her.
I will build the wall, and Mexico is going to pay for it, and they'll be happy to pay for it.
I'm not going to pay for that fucking wall.
This guy used a filthy, disgusting word on television, and he should be ashamed of himself, and he should apologize, okay?
Listen, you motherfuckers, we'll tax you 25%.
I'm going to bomb the shit out of them. We'll beat the shit out of them. Political bullshit.
You're not going to raise that fucking price, you understand?
Donald, true or false, you've said the government should pay for everyone's health care?
That's false.
You've never said that.
Everybody's got to be covered.
Universal health care.
I am going to take care of everybody.
Who pays for it?
The government's going to pay for it, but we're going to save so much money on the other side. He said I was in favor of Libya. I never discussed that subject. I was in favor of Libya. We would be so much better off if Gaddafi were in charge right now. Gaddafi in Libya is killing thousands of people. We should go in. We should stop this guy, which would be very easy and very quick. Stop him from doing it and save these lives. They're here illegally. You take them, they have to go back.
We have to show some compassion.
Right.
We just can't throw everybody out.
They have
so
to
you're going to
come
split up
illegally.
families.
Chuck,
You're going to deport children.
Chuck, no, we're going to keep the families together. We have to keep the families together.
But you're going to keep
but
them
they have
together
to
out.
go. But they have to go.
How do you throw somebody out that's lived in this country for 20 years?
North Korea has nukes. Japan has a problem with that. I mean, they have a big problem with it. Maybe they would, in fact, be better off if they defend themselves from North Korea. Maybe we would be better off, including with nukes. Yes, including with nukes. They said, I want Japan to nuke. I want Japan to get nuclear weapons. Give me a break.
But if you say to Japan, yes, it's fine, you get nuclear weapons, South Korea, you as well, and Saudi Arabia says we want them too.
Can I be honest with you? It's going to happen anyway. It's only a question of time. I'm a conservative person.
The Republicans are just too crazy right. I mean, just what's going on is just nuts.
Bush says, I do not believe he's a true conservative. These people are stupid.
Do you identify more as a Democrat or a Republican?
In many cases, I probably identify more as a Democrat. The economy does better under the Democrats than the Republicans.
I don't know anything about David Duke, okay? I don't know anything about what you're even talking about with white supremacy or white supremacists.
What do you see as the biggest problem with the Reform Party right now?
Well, you've got David Duke just joined, a bigot, a racist, a problem. I mean, this is not exactly the people you want in your party. Wages too high. We're not going to be able to compete against the world. I hate to say it, but we have to leave it the way it is. I don't know how people make it on $7.25 an hour. I would like to see an increase of some magnitude.
Do you believe voters have a right to see your tax returns before they make a final decision?
I don't think they do.
If I decide to run for office, I'll produce my tax returns, absolutely.
There have been many presidents that have not shown their tax returns.
Actually, every single nominee since 1976 has released their tax
returns. But before
returns.
1976...
nobody was worse to women or abused women more than Bill Clinton.
Look at the trouble Bill Clinton got into with something that was totally unimportant.
She's married to a man who got impeached.
They tried to impeach him, which was nonsense.
He was impeached for lying.
Honesty, Carter once said, "I'll never lie to you." Would you say that, the American people?
I would never lie.
When I'm president, I'm a different person. I can do anything. I can be the most politically correct person that you've ever seen. I can be the most politically correct person in the world. And I can be the opposite.
The president has to be a great leader, and you have to lead by example.
I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody, and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay? Like to punch him in the face.
I'd look her right in that fat, ugly face of hers.
Blood coming out of her wherever.
He's a war hero because he was captured. I like people that weren't captured, okay?
I don't know what I said.
This guy will say anything.
As far as the truth goes, we've got people in positions of power who I know for a fact are liars. Liars. I don't believe any one of them, not one. I believe Donald.
And I think in this era of disagreement and division, it's nice to find things upon which most of us can agree, including myself and some of my eggier colleagues. It's exactly like Brexit. That's it from me for another day. We'll do it again on Monday morning from 10. Do have a lovely weekend. Here's Sheila Fogarty.